All right, so we're just going to give a minute or so for everybody to join in. Lots of people joining in already. It's fantastic. So good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Hope you're doing well. I look like I'm in a forest, but I'm not actually. I'm at home today.
I actually am in a glass house.
Richard is bringing his authentic self.
I wouldn't know how to put a backdrop on.
Well, that could be a backdrop. You could be. How do we know it's not a backdrop? Like it could be actually.
Well, because I'd have no idea how to do that.
Yeah, that's very true. So yes, a very wet day out there today. Certainly where I am in Dunmore East in Waterford, it's lashing rain here now. And Richard, I think it's probably doing something similar in Grow HQ.
It is. It's actually needed. I've been working away, getting everything sown and planted and ready. So I got the last of the sowings in just as the rain started on my back. So I'm quite happy at that.
Yeah. So is it going to rain? Is it going to be a substantial amount of rain in the next few days, or
enough today to wet things nicely, and then drying up a bit for the weekend? I think possibly further west they have it wetter, but
okay. And it's gonna warm up a bit, although it's not warm out there today.
Not really. They changed their mind yesterday with the forecast. It was going to be sort of 24, 25 degrees. And the forecast I saw this morning for next week, it's more sunshine and showers and 18, 19 degrees, but we'll see anyway.
Okay. Okay, well, for anyone who's joining us, thanks for coming along. You'll be glad to hear that we do have something other than the weather to discuss today. We're going to be talking about pests and diseases. So I guess when we were planning out the year of these webinars, at the end of last year, we were kind of looking at, you think about the flow of the year and up to now, it's been very much about seed sowing and transplanting, and everything is perfect in many ways, although the weather wasn't particularly perfect. But everything is kind of, all your little seedlings are safe, and then you put them out in the garden, transplant them out, and then it's really around now at this time of the year that you realize that there's lots of other things out there want to eat the things that you're growing, and it's a problematic time of the year for pests and diseases, and also a really important time of the year to know what to do about them and keep on top of it if you want to have a kind of bountiful summer harvests and things. So I guess, Richard, it's been a kind of a slow season. Maybe before we get into pests and things, sort of reflect on that a bit. It's been difficult the last month, hasn't it? Because it got kind of warm in May, and then it got cool again.
To be honest, after a dreadful early spring, coming out the winter, which made me think about becoming an accountant. It's not been too bad. It's a little bit slow. Growth is a bit slower. But it's certainly preferable to last year when June was horribly hot. So yes, it's been a bit slow, but I've not had to get irrigation out and keeping on top of most things. So yeah, I'm not too behind now.
Okay. And I know from in some of our newsletters and things, you were talking about the joys of pheasants at our new market garden over in Curramore. So that was a bit of an unexpected, well, not entirely unexpected pest over there, I guess, but a very significant and
yeah, I've been having fantasies about pheasants roasting with a bit of bacon on the breast, but yeah, they just decimated everything we transplanted without nets. So the whole garden will be under nets because they have a pheasant shoot over there, which is very important to them. So we can't get rid of the pheasants. There's an obvious way to get rid of pheasants, but people pay to do that over there. So yeah, we're just, I think it really emphasizes the approach to pests and diseases. You know, it's I think the band Chumbawamba had a good start on this, which is you get knocked down, but you get up again.
Yeah.
A lot of people going into gardening think, oh yeah, I put stuff in and then I go away and leave it and nothing happens. You're constantly having things wanting to eat it as well. But you chip away, and first thing I do every morning here is go around and look, and you catch problems in the bud. And you see things happening, but often they're not necessarily a huge problem. For instance, on my broad beans at the moment, I have chocolate spot, I have a little bit of bean weevil, and I also have a small number of aphids.
Okay.
But I also have a large crop of broad beans coming on, you know, the second sowing. Uh, Unless you're prepared to poison everything, you have to accept a certain level of damage. The whiskey people call it the angel's share that they lose as evaporation from the barrel. And if you can get your head around the idea of imagining slugs as angels, then you've possibly achieved quite a level of mindfulness, but it will make your garden easier. You know, there's a bit for them and a bit for you, and I'm happy if I get 80 or 90% with a few holes in.
Yeah,
And you will
that,
lose the odd crop. That's the nature of it.
yeah, I think that's a really good way to think about it. I suppose what today is about then really is to avoid the scenarios where you lose everything, because I think that's the disconcerting bit for people. And
Absolutely, yeah.
it is fair to say it's probably the first time Chumbawamba have been cited as an inspiration or for their quote. But anyway, we'll leave that aside for a second. So let's start with slugs, the obvious place to start. Every person I've met in the last couple of weeks has said they've had a horrendous year with slugs so far. I think I'm not sure I would sort of agree with that it's any worse than any other year. But what's the slug situation like at HQ, for example?
Well, coming out of the wet early spring, it was so bad. I really was thinking of retraining as an accountant. You know, it was awful. The first transplanting of kale, I went into it 3 or 4 times to control slugs. But we've been harvesting baby kale as salad for a few weeks, and we harvested the first bags of mature kale for the kitchen. So we got there. But I mean, you have to accept Ireland is the land of saints, scholars, and slugs. It's just how it is with the weather here. So I will detail, because quite a few questions came in about slugs, how I work here. I don't think the metaldehyde slug pellets are they're no longer available to back garden people, as long as I know. But you can use the iron phosphate slug pellets that we've been using as organic growers for a number of years. They're not as effective, but they're part of your armory. They don't replace the metaldehyde, which killed everything, including all the blackbirds and thrushes as well. But they are part of the control. And then the range of other things I do, give them nowhere to hide. So keep down weeds, keep the grass short around the plot.
Before you move on to those other things, can you talk a little bit more about iron phosphate? Because I've kind of you pulled me up actually on I think it was in a press release where I said we
wouldn't do that.
Yeah, you do it all the time. It was about we don't use any chemicals, and you were saying iron phosphate is a chemical, but like, is it like what exactly are you putting on the soil when you put those so-called organic?
Well, it's iron and phosphorus, 2 chemicals which are combined as a molecule. 2 chemicals which are very much naturally found in the soil. So it breaks down to iron and phosphorus, which are phosphate, I suppose, which are naturally found in the soil. So the breakdown products aren't hazardous. There's no evidence that it goes up the food chain. That's the critical thing with metaldehyde. That it killed the slugs. The slugs were then eaten by birds and so on, and would then accumulate the toxins and could be killed. They
Okay.
also could be fatal to things like dogs and cats, so it really was unpleasant stuff, but extremely effective at killing slugs. You have to keep abreast of scientific developments, and I check anything, any papers written about iron phosphate and so on to see if there are any potential problems. But as of yet, we're seeing no environmental problems from it.
Okay.
It's fairly benign, but not massively effective, to be honest. You have to do the other things as well.
So
we're losing you there, Mick.
Don't...
Sorry, we're losing you.
Are you? Can you hear me?
Very faintly.
Okay, I don't know why that is.
There we go.
So I was just saying, so if the slugs don't eat it, it'll break down. Will it feed the soil as it breaks down? You're saying it's got iron and phosphate.
Well, yeah, phosphate is one of the major plant nutrients, and iron is needed by plants as well. So there's not any evidence that breakdown products are at all damaging.
Okay, all right. So what are the other
you keep everything short, grass and so on. I'm a great believer in having wild hedgerows, which I'll talk about later, wild edges to the garden for things like ladybirds and hoverflies and so on, the natural predators, which mean I have to do no aphid control in the garden at all. It's being done for me at the moment. I was looking at the ladybird larvae eating aphids for me. But immediately adjacent to the vegetable plot, keep it tidy. You can achieve an awful lot of slug control if you mow grass on a warm May evening with it when it's damp. Cut the grass very short and you will kill an awful lot of slugs doing that. You can trap them. Beer traps will work. You can also, which is very effective, put heavy planks down on wet soil or stones or something like that. The slugs will go under them. If you flip them up every day, make sure you do, otherwise you're providing a home for slugs to come and eat everything. Collect them all up. People who are really concerned about animal welfare might want to rehome them. If you do, take them a long way away and put them in your neighbour's garden. They'll come back from a short distance. Assuming you don't like your neighbour anyway. Of course, I get on great with my neighbours, or you can just send them to slug heaven. The choice is yours, obviously. And as a deterrent, I will sprinkle dried seaweed on, say, a transplanted cabbage or pumpkin or emerging row of anything they like, which is virtually every crop in the garden is they'll eat when they're young. They don't eat parsnips, actually, but and they're not too bothered about beetroot, but they'll certainly clear out carrots and all the brassicas, lettuce, salad crops. So I did all of those things 2 or 3 times, and even rotivated the soil around the edge of the beds for the kale in a horribly wet early spring. And I managed to get most of them through, but it wasn't easy. But now things are drying up a bit. I'm not doing too much slug control. I'm now more concerned with other things.
Catherine is asking there, and I think she's being deliberately provocative, knowing her, but she's saying, why did God make slugs in the first place? And it's an interesting question that they do have a function in the garden. Like, they do process, leaves, and they're all about breaking things down, I think, for us potentially, as well as being a significant pest.
Well, I think the serious point actually is that ecosystems weren't made for us. They have a massively important role in an ecosystem. And I mean, our attitude here in HQ is to grow lots of good produce, but tread as lightly on the earth as we can in doing so. And slugs are an essential part of the ecosystem for hedgehogs and so on to eat, and the birds to eat. All I try and do is keep them out of my veg patch when I don't want them, which is a bit of work, but I'm delighted for them to live in the hedgerows and be part of that ecosystem. We should treat the garden as something we share with nature, not something where we're stamping our authority on a piece of land.
Yeah, I like that. So there's a few other comments there. Somebody saying like rewilding a garden has become a bit of a haven for slugs. That's interesting. And Antoinette is asking about raw sheep's wool. So like Richard, what's your sense of the every garden center and every garden magazine you read is full of adverts for different slug controls, and I think that shows.
Yeah, they're just a way to part fools from the money, really.
Well, we won't necessarily call them fools, but yes, I see your point. What are the ones that you've come across that, like things like copper tape and sheep's wool?
Yeah,
and
no,
like
that was a bit rude of me, but there we go. The research I've seen recently, they have no impact whatsoever, and the idea of putting rough things around like pine needles or eggshells or whatever. I once saw a large garden slug 4 foot high on a stuccoed wall. They're not really very bothered. There's very little gravity on a slug body. That's more a human thing. You think, walking barefoot on gravel is not very comfortable. So they're just garden centres are full of things to try and part people from the money. As I say, keep the area clean. You see what dried seaweed. I've met people in the West using fresh seaweed as well, which they don't like the salt and they don't like the dried seaweed. And it will stick to leaves actually for a week or two with gentle showers. Because you're really getting most plants through the early stages. With carrots, for instance, they will graze right down to the ground when they first emerge as seedlings. But once they're 4 or 5 centimeters high, the slugs have no interest in them. Pumpkins, courgettes, they'll decimate a plant when you transplant them. But within a month, they have no interest in them at all. So it's largely a problem early in the season. And as I say, keep things clean, trap them, use the iron phosphate slug pellets, and keep the grass and so on short around your garden.
Okay, that's all great advice, and I'm just putting those top tips that we have into the chat there for people. Okay, so that's probably enough on slugs, I think. Although I will say, beer traps is often a favorite topic of mine to try different types of beers and all sorts. Somebody else there.
It's a good excuse, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a great excuse, yeah, like a little taste of the beer, just to see what it's like, and then put it out for the slugs.
Yes.
So somebody else saying they put out orange peels and they go straight to them, and I can collect them in the orange peels. Yes, I've
not heard that one. That sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at some other questions here. Orla was asking, what's eating my rhubarb leaves? It's not slugs. Very little snails and slugs around my garden. No sign of eggs under the leaves, and no obvious insect visible.
I would suspect it's slugs, because they certainly have slugs attacking mine in the very early part of the season. But rhubarb grows so vigorously, actually not mine early in the year here, it got flooded and looked very sorry for itself until about a month ago. But I would suspect it's slugs. Rhubarb leaves are very toxic. My grandfather once had his rabbits he kept for meat killed off by my grandmother feeding rhubarb leaves to them. It was one of those family stories that got recycled every Christmas. But
imagine there was a bit of a row over that.
Yes, certainly was. But very few things eat them. I might be wrong, but would suspect it's slugs. You would rarely see eggs around and about the thing they're eating. They wriggle in from outside, but they'll grow through it. I mean, we don't eat the rhubarb leaves. They certainly don't eat the rhubarb leaves. So again, that's sort of saying a little bit of damage. It's neither here nor there, really.
Okay, that's a good one. Next one is about carrots, and I can kind of empathize with this problem. Tom sent us in a note to say he's having trouble growing carrots. Seedlings start off okay, but then disappear, both outdoors and in the tunnel.
I would suspect it's slug grazing. If it was root fly, have a look. Are they being grazed to the bottom? And you'll see tiny little stumpy bits of carrot left, the carrot leaves when the slugs graze them. Is it that, or are they getting to about so high and then going very yellow and miserable and dying? If they're doing that, that'll be root fly eating the carrots below ground and eating the roots. Pull them up and have a look. You might even find a little maggot. They're the two most probable. A third, less likely possibility is mineral deficiency. And certainly, I think we had a question on beet there. And I use an organic boron supplement on beet and carrots here because our soil is boron deficient. And they can look very yellow and miserable unless they get that. So check for the two things I mentioned there, slugs or the root fly. If they're getting yellow and miserable, which is the problem, then a good back garden tonic is liquid seaweed. You can buy that in bottles, or if you live on the coast, you can make it. That's a pretty smelly process. And water that in as a general mineral tonic. And that will often perk most plants up if they're short of a particular minor trace element.
Okay. But like the carrots, like if they're tiny little seedlings, a boron deficiency wouldn't just make them disappear, right? Like that's much.
Well, they
more
wouldn't
likely to
disappear,
be
as I say. They would go yellow and miserable and done. I mean, I have a look at my garden every day here. If it's somebody who maybe only gets out there every week or two,
yeah,
all of this drama could have gone on in the meantime. They could have. So I think the most likely is slugs, but in which case you'll find tiny little stumpy bits of foliage left.
yeah.
But the other two is a possibility as well.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a pain, of course, with carrots because they've probably taken 2 to 3 weeks to germinate, and
Yes.
and then another 2 weeks for this to happen. Now you're 5 weeks behind on where you want to be with your carrots, which is annoying.
There's still plenty of time to sow them. I once did a trial to see how late I could go with carrots, and I sowed some on the 20th of August and I had baby carrots to eat in November. I wasn't expecting that, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. That was a particularly warm autumn, but you can certainly go into the beginning of July sowing carrots. So, keep going on it.
Okay. Somebody's saying there in the chat, I think it's Mags, she's got a cleared gel on the rhubarb stalks, as well as the leaves being eaten. That sounds like slugs too, right? Because if it's a clear gel,
clear
it's
gel. Sometimes if they've been well fed, they might exude. I've noticed sort of a sap.
Slugs.
Just from the rhubarb themselves.
Oh.
If they're very well fed and watered, they can sort of exude a little. I don't know, well, it's sap, I suppose, but I've noticed that a few times. No, I mean, I wouldn't say there's any harm, particularly if they're still growing. I mean, rhubarb grows very vigorously, so it can cope with quite a bit of pest and disease attention, and it'll still be fine.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the carrot one, and that is I guess if you do manage to grow the carrots successfully beyond that seedling phase, carrot root fly becomes a problem. So do you want to just speak a little bit about prevention there? It's really about covering, I guess, isn't it?
We have a very simple approach to pests and diseases here, really, in that the only chemical I use, I say, is I'm coming on to carrot root fly in a minute, is the iron phosphate slug pellet. It's the only chemical we use in the whole garden. And most of our other problems are solved by two different things. One is nets. We use a very fine crop net, which we buy online. That's what I say, isn't it? Rather than mail order. Buy online, and it's you keep the crop covered, and it protects from the voracious rooks and jackdaws we have here, the pigeons. And then for carrots, it protects the carrot root fly. So that's all we need to do. Cover them with a net, and make sure you cover nice and early because you don't quite know when the carrot root fly generations are going to emerge. And when you do things like thinning and weeding, thinning for carrots is vital if you want a good yield. You want them about 4 or 5 centimeters apart, really. Then make sure the net is covered, gets put straight back, and you don't sort of do a few in the morning, leave the net off, and go and have lunch and come back later. You cover the net behind you all the time because they will smell it and they will nip in. So that solves the problem really. With our brassicas, it keeps off pigeons and the butterflies and so on. It controls most things. The final thing actually I do, which is vital for us here, is rely on natural predators, as I said. So we have a garden which is hopefully very friendly to pollinators. And in doing that, we create a garden which is friendly to the predators, the ladybirds, the hoverflies, lacewings, all the things that do control the insects for us. And there's always aphids around the garden, but they never develop to a level where they're doing much harm because they're constantly being grazed by the predators. And even as an organic grower, I could use things like pyrethrum extract, which is an extract from a plant, which is an insecticide, but I don't, because if you do that, it's like swallowing the spider to eat the fly. You end up on a treadmill. And so on the broad beans, I'll always get a few aphids appearing. If I sit on my hands and do nothing, within a week or two, the ladybirds have moved in and clearing them up for me. If I sprayed, I then have to keep spraying for the whole season.
It's a bit of you need to hold your nerve with a thing like that, don't you? Like it's kind of, give the ladybirds a chance to move in.
Yes, there's always a delay.
Yeah, so you have to hold your nerve for a week or so.
Yeah.
So Des is asking. He says he's got chocolate spot on his broad beans, which is not as much fun as it sounds. And there's ants feeding off them. Are they feeding off the aphids though that are on the tips rather than they're not?
Got chocolate spot?
No, he's got ants. There's ants feeding off on the plants. So are the ants trying to get at aphids?
I very much doubt they're feeding on the plants because ants. I mean, certainly when I was working in East Africa, ants could be and termites could be a major pest. But I've never really come across ants that do any harm in Ireland. What's almost most likely to be eating aphids. And we had a fascinating thing on our apples here, which was ants farming aphids last year. They will keep predators away from the ants and farm the ants for their honeydew, for their sap, which the aphids eat the sap and they exude some for the ants to come and farm. So it's farming. And I mean, the apple tree concern is one of my espaliers. Got a little bit knocked back, but I wasn't going to do anything. I find it fascinating, to be honest. I mean, work with these things.
So Bernie is asking, she's got birds attacking fruit, finding it hard, fruit trees, hard to net them, and some of the birds have managed to get in under the net. She has to untangle them, which is not easy.
Yeah, we net all our soft fruit. In fact, netting the black currants today as they're just starting to ripen, and we make sure the net's really tight. Because if it's really, we put rocks along the base to hold it in and under tension, the birds seem to really not like to go into anything which is tight, and that scares them. If it's loose, they'll try and wriggle under. But I know how she feels with large trees. I have a lovely cherry tree at home, and I've not harvested a cherry in 10 years because it's a big mature tree. It looks lovely blossom. But I've just decided that, the blackbirds have to have them. There's no way I can net it. We're okay with the apples here for some reason. The jackdaws and rooks don't seem to be that interested. But all of the soft fruit has to be netted, otherwise they're decimated.
Yeah.
There's no other way around it that I'm aware of, really. Although I did know a cherry grower in the UK who employed teenagers going back many years to make lots of noise. The only thing they had to do was turn up at dawn and make as much noise as they could, play music as loud as they could, or whatever it was, to try and deter the birds. And it seemed to work, but So if you want to employ people to come in at 4 in the morning and make a lot of noise, I suppose that's the only other approach.
No, we don't want to do that. David's asking what biological
Sorry, Mick, you're
control.
fading there.
Sorry, I don't know why that's happening, Richard. What biological control would you recommend for the larvae of butterflies, sawflies, and moths?
Well, you can buy a bacteria, which it's called Bacillus thuringiensis. You can buy it in bottles, bottles of bacteria, which are very specific. They only kill the larvae of what's scientifically known as Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths. And I have used that in the past. So that can be sprayed on. Even though it's specifically to kill caterpillars, I'd still recommend you wear PPE on it, gloves and masks on if you're spraying it. But I control cabbage white now on the brassicas just by netting. But you can buy it in a dried form, and then you mix it up and spray it on.
Okay. John has asked us two separate things here. What would you suggest to protect crops from squirrels and pigeons? So pigeons, I guess it's netting. But
both make very good eating.
we won't.
I've eaten both. Pigeons are some of my favourite thing to eat. So it's great. Yeah, they're surprisingly tasty. But well, I wouldn't recommend eating red squirrels. But red squirrels are rarely a pest. Grey squirrels are incredible pest. The only thing is netting, or eating them, I suppose. But they're so clever that you have to net really well. They'll find ways in. And yeah, they're not nice things to have. But red squirrels, I mean, is gentleman concerned, it might be a red squirrel, but I've never known red squirrels be a pest.
Oh, it's a grey squirrel, he said. It is. So Jelena then asks, she says she's got an infestation of aphids and ants in the polytunnel this year. Any tips? So
I genuinely have never sprayed in my tunnel for aphids. Because I make sure, this is my excuse, Mick, for having it untidy around the tunnel, that there's rough vegetation around, and they actually are often killed. If you leave them, you'll see mummified little aphids left, and it's tiny parasitic wasps are eating them from the inside out. That can often happen. Peppers are the thing that most likely to get aphids. So I just rely on that control. When I was a commercial grower before I came here, I had a bottle of pyrethrum as an insurance policy. I couldn't afford to lose crops, making a living from it. And I had it so long the label fell off the bottle. I never opened it. I mean, slugs, yes, you have to do a lot to control them. Aphids in a well-managed organic garden should not be a problem. They'll be there, but they won't be a problem.
Yeah, you hear people talking about companion planting in a tunnel to, where you're growing tomatoes and peppers and things that. Would they help, like having
I've never done it myself because I just rely on that natural control. But I know people who've told me it can be effective deterring them. So marigold is a common one that people, they look nice anyway. If you have some little marigolds growing around the base of your tomatoes, can't do any harm, can it?
Yeah. Okay. So, but we're not so worried about ants, you're saying. I've had a couple of in raised beds. I'm not. No. You'd be inclined just to leave them rather than treat for them.
Yeah, I've never done anything for ants. They often like my tomato tunnel because they keep that dry to control blight. We've not really talked much about diseases, actually. It's all pests.
Yeah.
But blight, I will mention blight, actually, because I've been trying to do some blight control this morning. I control blight on my tomatoes by keeping the tunnel really dry, which seems to make a nice environment for ants. And there'll be little holes around with some ants running around in the tunnel. Don't really bother me at all. I just leave them there. But blight, I will mention that, even if no one's put any questions in. It's become an incredibly serious problem in the new blight. Well, it always was. I mean, hence the horrific history here. But the blight organism is evolving incredibly rapidly. Most fungicides are barely working now. Conventional potato producers in Ireland are tearing their hair out, having to use more and more cocktails of pesticides, fungicides.
Not good.
I mean, the guys have to make a living. I'm not being critical, but it's very hard work. And they're also evolving resistance to the resistance genes in, that got in the potatoes now for trying to have resistant varieties. So yeah, there's a little bit of blight come on for potatoes this morning. I've noticed. And what I do is liquid feed with liquid seaweed or a general fertilizer with organic fertilizer with lots of trace elements in. Seaweed is a good one. And do the best you can to grow them in a dry area.
So sorry,
good breeze.
What does the liquid seaweed do? It's just about helping the plants be healthy.
It strengthens them up. It's a little bit like taking a tonic if you're feeling unwell yourself. It's a tonic. With lots of trace elements, and it's possible the salt has a little bit of impact, but I'm not sure. The old fungicide, copper sulfate, in my experience, which I could use as an organic grower, but don't, has virtually no impact now at all. Blight is completely tolerant of copper sulfate, is my experience. So it's not worth the bother. It's very hard work, and it will get harder, but try and use varieties which are resistant if you like the flavour of them. If not, I mean, things like British Queen, Golden Wonder just seem to go down at the first whiff of blight. And then when the foliage is maybe half dead, cut all the leaves off. And if you've got main crop potatoes, leave them in the ground for a month before you dig them for storage. You can dig them to use that day, but if you want to store them, leave them in the ground, and then the potato skin gets tougher and the blight organisms in the soil are killed off. And then you can harvest the potatoes. Interestingly enough, if you use fungicide, including copper, you will have more problem with blight spores washing onto the potatoes because you've killed the beneficial fungi in the soil, which kill the blight spores on the way down. So don't once you've got bad blight, fungicide does nothing. It's a preventative rather than a curative. So if you have used sprays, stop at that point. Otherwise, you'll make it easier for the blight spores to go through the soil onto your potato tubers.
And I guess when you cut the plants down to stop it going into the tubers don't grow anymore after that. Would that be?
They don't, but they'll mature.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've got 6 minutes left, Richard. So we're a bit of a quick fire buzzer round for you, right? In the chat there, Margaret's asking about keeping rodents out of the veg garden. That's a tricky one, right? Because nobody wants to see mice or rats in where they're growing their veg. What do you do about
that? There's you can use the old-fashioned rat traps, but watch your thumbs. I nearly broke my thumb one day with one, which is the environmentally. I mean, there's no way around apart from killing them, unfortunately. And they're lovely, intelligent creatures. They just want to share the world with us. But I do kill them. That is an environmentally benign way of doing it. Say they're hard to set. You really, but failing that, you have to use poisons. And I mean, we legally have to here. We have a bait boxes set by a company. No way around it really, but one thing, we employ a very reputable company, and they put a attractant down, which isn't a poison bait. Will only use poison in small quantities when rats are detected. So there's very little going into the environment, and that they wouldn't put enough in the environment to then kill predators of the rats. So If you can afford it, get somebody in to do it, because they'll manage it in a way better than you would do in your own home, you know.
Yeah.
But
Also,
it's
I mean,
unfortunate there's no way around it that I'm aware of.
very effective predator for mice and rats, but then cats can be their own problem in the veg patch as well, using raised beds to pee in and stuff like that. But probably the lesser of two evils there, I would guess. So we'll keep going, Richard.
Yep.
So somebody asking about potato worm, which is a significant pest in potatoes as well as
I
blight, right?
assume they mean potato eelworm, the nematode.
Or
I assume.
wireworm, is it?
Well, sorry, yeah, it's either wireworm. I'll answer both questions.
No, I think it's wireworm. Sorry, I
Wireworm.
misread that.
Okay. Well, I'll also answer nematodes just in case it's that.
Do it
Wireworm.
very quickly. We've got 4 minutes
Yeah,
left.
wireworm is the larvae of a beetle. They live for 3 or 4 years, and the beetle likes to live in grass or rough vegetation. So when you first dig in some grass or plow in some grass, there'll be a problem for a few years. Keep it clean for a few years, and the numbers of wireworm diminish down to virtually nothing if you don't have rough grass. If it's nematodes, then that you need to rotate potatoes 1 year in 4, so that the number of nematodes never built up.
Okay. Margaret is saying there seems to be more leather jackets around this season. She's finding loads of them when weeding.
Yeah, the damp autumn probably didn't do much good on that. Best bet there is to keep cultivating the soil and encourage the rooks and jackdaws in. They love them.
Right.
And I mean, you can pull them yourself as well. But if you leave the soil loose, keep loosening it up. I make good use of our jackdaws and rooks here, which we have lots of, to control things. I rotate the ground and then deliberately go to another part of the garden to encourage them in to eat them.
Okay. And what if you were following a kind of a no dig approach? Then you couldn't, and you don't want to cultivate the soil. You're probably just going to have leather jackets
Yeah,
more often.
I mean, zero cultivation, no dig is a great way to do it. But you improve biodiversity, which is soil biodiversity, which will include leather jackets.
Yeah. Okay. And leather jackets are the larvae of the daddy longlegs. Am I right in saying that?
They are, yes.
So what are
They
they? What are they a problem for? Lettuce and things. I think. Do they eat through the
um,
lettuce?
any fibrous rooted seedling, really. Particularly transplants when a plant's trying to get itself going, and they'll knock it back. So yeah, they're a problem for that. Try and keep the ground free of vegetation in back end of the year, sort of September time is August, September seems to be when a lot of the eggs are laid, and the daddy longlegs will lay into nice grass and so on. You know.
Yeah. Okay. And then final question was from Aileen. She was asking about something eating her beetroot leaves. The leaves, as well as being eaten, look as if they've been burnt. So that was your
I
point
would
earlier about
suspect not
boron.
eaten. What I suspect is mineral deficiency. My beetroot leaves look pretty dreadful with holes in, unless I put the boron supplement on. I wouldn't
Okay.
suggest in the back that's based on soil and leaf analysis and so on. A back garden, use some liquid seaweed,
Okay.
water that on, and hopefully that will give them the mineral tonic and they'll grow through it.
Okay. Brilliant. We're going to have to leave it there. We're up at 2 o'clock. So thanks a million to everyone for joining in and all the
Thank you.
brilliant questions. Thanks, Richard, for your time. Go back to your blight patrols that you were doing earlier on, and I'm going to go back to bed. So thank you everyone for joining us, and
Thank you.
we'll see you next month. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your garden and happy growing.
Bye bye.
All right, so we're just going to give a minute or so for everybody to join in. Lots of people joining in already.